You never really know what people are capable of until they show you. I learned that the day my own family looked me in the eye and told me they were taking my home. My name is Sabrina. I'm 32 years old. And I never thought the people who were supposed to love me would betray me. Twice, growing up in Pennsylvania, my family looked normal from the outside. My dad, Richard, was a bank manager, always in a crisp suit, that briefcase practically grafted to his hand. My mom, Diane, was a nurse, working long shifts but still keeping our house spotless. And my older brother, Brian, he was the golden child, 3 years older and destined for greatness. I felt the difference early. Brian's mediocre grades were celebrated. Mine, my straight A's were just expected. When he got into state university, my parents threw him a huge party and bought him a brand new car. They drained their savings to make sure he had no debt. Me, I was told from 14 that I'd need to work to save for college. By 16, I was clocking 20 hours a week at a local diner, slinging pancakes and burgers. The message was never said out loud, but it was crystal clear. Brian was the investment, I was the afterthought, but there was one person who saw me. My grandma, Margaret. She lived an hour away in this magical little cottage with a garden that felt like another world. I spent weeks with her every summer. Her hands, weathered from years of gardening, would guide mine in the soil. Sabrina, she'd tell me, never let anyone tell you what your worth is, only you decide that. Never depend on someone else to keep a roof over your head. Learn to build your own. Her words became my compass, especially when things at home got suffocating. When college applications rolled around, the pressure exploded. My mom decided I should be a nurse. It's stable, Sabrina. You'll always have work. My dad agreed. Creative careers are for people with family money to fall back on. What they didn't get was that I'd found my passion, graphic design. My art teacher, Miss Winters, saw something in me. I'd stay after school, working on projects. I even won a regional award. My parents called it a nice hobby. The breaking point came at dinner one night. My acceptances were in. My parents refused to contribute a single dime unless I switched to nursing or business. We are not wasting money on an art degree, my father said, his voice final. If you want to throw away your future, you can pay for it yourself. I looked at my mom. She just stared at her plate, and Brian, home from college, smirked at me. Maybe you should listen to Dad, Sabrina. Not everyone is cut out for a real career. I cried myself to sleep that night, but the next morning I made a decision. I would go to community college. I would work. And I would get my design degree no matter what. When I told them, my father just shrugged. Your life, your mistake. So I did it. I graduated, moved into a tiny apartment with roommates, and worked nearly 40 hours a week while maintaining a 3.8 GPA. I visited Grandma Margaret for strength. After 2 years, I transferred to a state university to finish my bachelor's. By then, I was barely speaking to my parents. Our interactions were just obligatory holiday visits. My dad would ask about my income potential. My mom would slip me a $20 bill and whisper, in case you need to eat. Brian graduated, got a job at a financial firm. Every family gathering was a showcase of his success and a subtle highlight of my failure. I graduated alone at 22. My parents went to a conference for Brian's work instead. The only family in the audience was Grandma Margaret, now using a walker. Her proud smile meant everything. I decided to move to Philadelphia for a design internship. The night before I left, I had dinner with Grandma. I'm scared. I admitted, what if they're right, what if I fail? She took my hand. Her blue eyes were still so sharp. Sabrina, she said, the only true failure is living someone else's dream. You follow your heart. I will always be here if you need a soft place to land. With those words in my mind, I drove toward my future. Philadelphia was tough, but rewarding. I went from intern to junior designer. The pay was modest, but I was building a life. I shared an apartment with a teacher named Jessica. We became close friends. I called Grandma Margaret every week. My contact with my parents dwindled to nothing. Then 5 years ago, the bottom fell out. A recession hit. The marketing agency I worked for just collapsed, doors locked. Bankruptcy notice on the window. I was unemployed. I scrambled for freelance work. but budgets were being cut everywhere. My savings evaporated. I got an eviction warning. Jessica helped, but she couldn't carry me. Panic set in. I was weeks from homelessness. I swallowed my pride and called my parents. "Mom, it's Sabrina," I said, my voice already shaking. "I need help." I explained everything, asked if I could borrow 1 month's rent. Promised to pay them back. Silence. Then my father's voice, cold and distant. "Sabrina, this is exactly what we warned you about. This unstable career path has led you exactly where we predicted. Dad, please," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I just need a little help. We've been supporting Brian with his MBA tuition." My mother chimed in. "We don't have extra funds." It was a lie. They always had money for Brian. "You made your bed when you ignored our advice." My father said, "Perhaps this will teach you to make more practical decisions." Click. The call ended. No help. Not even a couch to sleep on. I sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by boxes, and sobbed. That night, I found out Grandma Margaret was in the hospital with pneumonia. I couldn't even go to her. I had no money for the trip. 2 weeks later, I was officially evicted. Jessica helped me pack my car. My essentials were all that fit. The rest went into a storage unit I paid for with my last $100. With nowhere else to go, I drove to my parents' house. It was raining. I sat in their driveway for 20 minutes, watching them through the window, watching TV. I finally rang the bell. My father answered. Surprise turned to disapproval. "Sabrina, what are you doing here?" "Dad, I lost my apartment. I just need a place to stay for a few weeks. Please." He looked past me at my stuffed car and frowned. This is exactly what happens with these artistic careers. Instability. My mother appeared behind him, her expression hardened. "Our daughter seems to have found herself homeless." He told her, "I'm not homeless." My voice broke. "I just need family right now." My father crossed his arms. "You chose your path. You chose to ignore our guidance. Now you need to take responsibility. We're hosting the neighborhood association tomorrow." My mother added, "This really isn't a good time." I stood in the rain, stunned. "You're turning me away, your own daughter. You cannot reject our advice and then expect our support," my father said, and he closed the door in my face. I stood there, soaked, waiting for them to change their minds. They never did. I drove to a Walmart parking lot and slept in my car. I had $25 to my name, nowhere to go. I called Brian, texted him, no answer. For 2 weeks, I lived in my car, showering at a gym, using library computers to search for jobs. I drove past my parents' house one night and saw Brian's car there. The whole family, together, without me. It was the lowest point of my life, completely abandoned. Then, on a cold November morning, everything changed. I was in a coffee shop, nursing a single tea, searching for jobs online. I looked, disheveled. My clothes were wrinkled. I was trying to be invisible. Sabrina Wilson. I looked up. It was Eleanor Garcia, a former colleague from the agency. She looked successful, put together. I was mortified. "Eleanor, hi. I thought that was you," she said. "I've been trying to reach you. How are you? Working somewhere new?" I was too exhausted to lie. "Not exactly. I'm between places right now." Her face softened. "Between places as in housing." I nodded, fighting tears. "Sabrina," she leaned in, her voice low. "Are you living in your car?" I broke. I just nodded, tears spilling down my cheeks. "Why didn't you reach out?" She said, "Come on, pack your stuff. You're coming with me." Before I could protest, she'd whisked me away to her apartment. She made me food, showed me her spare bedroom. "It's yours for as long as you need it," she said. I was overwhelmed. "I can't accept this. We were just coworkers. We were a team," she corrected, "and now we're friends. This is what friends do." Then she told me about a job. Her boyfriend, Michael, ran a small design studio. They needed help. It was entry level, but it was steady. The next day, I met Michael. He looked at my portfolio and hired me on the spot. That afternoon, as Eleanor helped me get my things, I got a call. It was my grandmother's neighbor. "Your grandmother's condition has worsened. The doctors aren't optimistic. She's been asking for you. Eleanor didn't hesitate. We'll go right now. We drove 3 hours to the hospital. Grandma Margaret looked so small in that bed, but her eyes lit up when she saw me. She reached for my hand. My Sabrina, she whispered, I knew you would come. I sat with her all night. I didn't tell her about my homelessness. I just told her about my new job, my new hope, thanks to Eleanor. I said. She smiled weakly. I always told you, you make your own way. In the early morning, she asked for her purse. Inside was a key and a folded document, my will. She said softly, the house is yours, always meant for you. I tried to tell her she'd get better. She shook her head. Listen now. She said, her voice firm, you have the spirit, the strength. Brian has your parents. You need roots. 2 days later, she was gone. At the reading of the will, my parents' demeanor shattered. Grandma had left the cottage and her savings to me. Small mementos for them and Brian. My father's face darkened with rage. My mother burst into tears. Mother always favored you. She accused me. I didn't have the energy to fight. I took the keys to my grandmother's house. My house, it needed work, but it was mine, a home. Eleanor helped me move in. For the first time in months, I slept feeling safe. In my grandmother's garden, I could almost hear her. You build your own shelter, Sabrina. You always could. I started rebuilding. I turned the cottage into a home office and launched my own design business, Elevation Designs. I started with Patrick, the local bookstore owner, who needed a new logo. Word spread. My business grew. I renovated the cottage. I brought the garden back to life. My relationship with Patrick deepened. I built a life, a real one. For 5 years, I had no contact with my parents. Just impersonal Christmas cards. Then, out of the blue, an email from Brian, touching base. He was impressed by my website. My guard went up. Patrick said it perfectly. Sounds like someone wants something. The call started. My mom, her voice artificially bright. We've been thinking about you. We should reconnect. Maybe we could visit. She called our past misunderstandings. I agreed to a lunch. I set boundaries, brief. No overnight stay. Patrick came for moral support. When they arrived, I saw the change. My father looked, diminished. My mother hugged me with teary eyes. Brian was scanning the property, calculating. Lunch was tense. They complimented the house, then detailed their struggles. Brian's bad investments, my father's forced early retirement, my mother's back problems, they'd lost everything. As they were leaving, Brian used the bathroom for a suspiciously long time. I noticed him taking pictures with his phone. Patrick saw it too. They're planning something, Sabrina. Be careful. The calls kept coming, probing questions about the heating system, the deed. The truth came out during their second visit. We were in the garden. Sabrina, my father began, this house has 3 bedrooms. You're just one person. We're struggling. It makes sense for us to move in here. A family home should house a family. I was speechless. This is my home, I finally said. Surely she intended it to benefit the whole family. My mother said she wouldn't want us struggling. Actually, she left it to me because she knew I was the only one who would truly care for it. Well, regardless. My father dismissed her. We're family. We should support each other. Brian can take the room above the garage. Your mother and I will take the master bedroom. That's my office, I said, incredulous. You could move your little computer to the dining room. My mother suggested. This is not happening. I stated, you are not moving in here. The conversation exploded, guilt trips, anger, entitlement. I called my lawyer the second they left. The house is solely in your name. He assured me they have no claim. I didn't trust them. I installed security cameras. A few weeks later, I had to go to a conference in Boston. On my second night away, I got a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. Lights are on in your house, everything okay? My heart stopped. I wasn't home. I opened my security app, and I watched in real time as my father's car pulled in. I watched him force my back door lock. I watched him, my mother, and Brian carry in suitcases and boxes. They were moving in. I called Patrick. they're breaking into my house. I'm on my way, he said. I called my dad's phone. He declined the call, my mom's, Brian's. Finally, I called my home landline. Brian answered, "Hello, Wilson residence." "Brian, what the hell are you doing in my house?" "Sabrina, we were going to call you tomorrow. We're just getting settled in." "Settled in, you broke in, you're trespassing. Don't be dramatic," he said coolly. "This is a family home, we're family." I heard my father in the background. "Tell her we'll discuss it when she returns. The decision has been made. Get out, now," I said. "Or I'm calling the police." His voice hardened. "That would be a mistake. We have nowhere to go. Calling the police on your family is cruel." Then the threat. "We've spoken to a lawyer about challenging the will. Grandma was old, not competent. We have a good case." I hung up, booked the first flight home, and called the police. Patrick picked me up at the airport. They're still there. When we pulled up to my cottage, I felt sick. My mother's pillows were on the porch swing. My father's golf clubs by the door. I used my key and walked into my own home. My living room was rearranged. Their boxes were everywhere. Their family photos were on my mantel. My mother jumped when she saw me. "Sabrina, we weren't expecting you." Clearly. I found my father in my bedroom, hanging his suits in my closet. Brian was in my office, my equipment shoved in a corner. I gathered them in the living room. Patrick stood firmly by my side. "You need to leave now. Sabrina, be reasonable." My father boomed. "You don't even have a real family." My mother spat, her voice venomous. "No husband, no children. We need this house." Patrick stepped forward. "This doesn't concern you." My father snapped at him. "He's more family to me than you've ever been." I said, "We're here now, ready to be a family again." Brian said, "After you've depleted your resources and need something from me." I shot back, "This is about you wanting my house." My father looked me dead in the eye. "We will take this house, one way or another." That was it, the final line. I took out my phone and dialed 911. "What are you doing?" my mother shrieked. "Calling the police to report trespassers." The 15 minutes until they arrived were a silent standoff. When the officers knocked, I explained everything, showed my ID, the deed. My father tried his family matter argument. The officer wasn't having it. "Sir, if you don't have legal residence here, you need to leave, or you will be arrested for trespassing." As they packed their things under police supervision, my mother came to me, crying. "How could you do this to your own parents?" I looked right back at her, my heart a stone. "The same way you could turn away your daughter when she had nowhere else to go." I got a restraining order. The security footage made it clear. Their legal threats were bluffs. My grandmother was perfectly competent. My father and Brian got probation. In the aftermath, my mother sent a letter. It seemed genuine. "I see now how terribly we failed you," she wrote. "There is no excuse." I acknowledged it, but trust like that, it doesn't just come back. I focused on healing, on therapy, on the family I'd built. Patrick, Eleanor, my community. A year after they broke in, Patrick proposed in Grandma Margaret's garden. "You deserve a family who sees your worth," he said. We got married in that same garden, surrounded by the people who had chosen me. The cottage is more than a house now. It's a sanctuary. I started a small foundation in my grandmother's name, offering housing and mentorship to young adults cast out by their families, just like I was. The first person I helped was a design student whose parents cut her off when she chose art over business. The parallels weren't lost on me. I look around now at my home, my business, my husband, my purpose. And I know Grandma Margaret was right. The only true failure is living someone else's dream. I had to learn that having no family is better than having one that hurts you, and that the family you choose, that's the one that's truly precious. You'd think after getting a restraining order against your own parents, that would be the end of it, that they'd finally get the message. But for people who believe they're entitled to your life, a piece of paper is just another obstacle to navigate around. The first year after the standoff was quiet, eerily so. The permanent restraining order meant they couldn't contact me or come within 500 feet of my property. For the first time in my life, I had legally enforced peace. I poured myself into my marriage, my business, and the foundation. Helping Jame, that first young woman I took in, was more healing than any therapy session. Seeing her flourish, getting her first real design job. It was like watching my own redemption arc play out in fast forward. Patrick and I settled into a deep, comfortable happiness. We'd work in the garden, run the bookstore and design studio side by side, and build a life that was everything I'd ever wanted but never thought I could have. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't always looking over my shoulder. Trauma does that to you. You wait for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on a Tuesday. I was at the town's annual arts festival, event I now helped organize, showing off some of my foundation's work. My phone buzzed. It was a local number I didn't recognize. Sabrina Lewis. A woman's voice asked, speaking. "This is Officer Greeley from the County Sheriff's Office. We have a situation. A Richard and Diane Wilson are at the county clerk's office, attempting to file a fraudulent lien against your property, citing family debt. They're making quite a scene. My blood ran cold. They couldn't get to me directly, so they were trying to attack my home, my stability, from a bureaucratic angle. Patrick was at his booth selling books. I caught his eye and must have looked pale because he was at my side in seconds. There at the county clerk's, I whispered, trying to put a lien on the cottage. His face set. Let's go. We drove to the county building in silence, my hand gripping his. When we walked in, we heard my father's voice before we saw him. He was at a counter, his tone that same infuriating, entitled boom he'd always used. I don't care what your computer says. I am her father. This is a moral debt. She owes us for years of support. My mother was standing beside him, clutching a purse, her face a mask of strained victimhood. The clerk, a young woman who looked utterly overwhelmed, saw me and her eyes widened in relief. Mr. Wilson, the property owner, is right here. My father turned. The look in his eyes wasn't surprise. It was defiance. Sabrina, perfect timing. You can clear this up for these people. Clear what up, Dad? I said, my voice dangerously calm. The fact that you're violating a restraining order and committing fraud. This has nothing to do with that piece of paper. He spat. This is about what's right. We raised you, we clothed you, that has a cost. You live in that big house, built with our effort while we struggle. We are entitled to compensation. I looked at the clerk. Have they filed anything? They're trying, she said, gesturing to a handwritten form. But they don't have the required documentation. I've told them this isn't how it works. Just then, 2 sheriff's deputies walked in. Officer Greeley had been as good as her word. My father puffed out his chest. Finally, officers, perhaps you can talk some sense into my daughter. One of the deputies, a man with a calm, tired face, looked at me. Ms. Lewis, yes, this is my father, Richard Wilson, and my mother, Diane. There is an active restraining order against them prohibiting this contact, and they are currently attempting to file a fraudulent financial claim against my home. The deputy turned to my father. Sir, is that true? This is a family matter. My father insisted, his face turning red. She can't just cut us out and keep everything for herself. Sir, a court order isn't a suggestion. The deputy said, his voice firm. You are in violation. You need to come with us. The reality of the situation finally seemed to hit my mother. No, please, we're her parents. She's our daughter, she cried, turning to me. Sabrina, tell them this is all a misunderstanding. We just want to talk. I looked at her. At the tears that now, for the first time, seemed real, not of anger, but of sheer, desperate panic. The facade was crumbling. There's no misunderstanding, Mom, I said, my voice quiet but clear in the hushed room. You showed up at my workplace. This festival is my event. You came to a government building to file a false claim against my house. The law is very clear, and so am I. As the deputies began to lead them away, my father was still protesting, his voice echoing through the corridor. But my mother, she just looked back at me, and in her eyes, I didn't see anger anymore. I saw a devastating, horrifying clarity. She finally understood that she had lost, for good. The legal consequences this time were more severe. Violating a restraining order is a serious offense. Combined with the attempted fraud, my father faced actual jail time. He pled it down to a longer probation, hefty fines, and mandatory community service. But the real turning point came a month later. I was working in my garden when a car I didn't recognize pulled up outside the restraining order boundary, down the street. My mother got out, alone. She didn't cross the line. She just stood there on the public road, her hands clasped in front of her. She looked small, old. My first instinct was rage. How dare she come here, to my sanctuary? But she wasn't demanding anything. She wasn't shouting. She was just waiting. After a few minutes, I made a decision. I walked down my driveway, stopping just on my property line. We stood there, separated by about 15 feet of asphalt and a world of hurt. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said, her voice frail. "Then why are you here, Mom?" She took a shaky breath. "Your father is filing for divorce." The statement hung in the air. I said nothing. "He blames me. He says I wasn't forceful enough, that I failed him." She looked down at her hands. "Brian moved to Arizona. He hasn't returned my calls in weeks." I remained silent, letting her sit in the reality she'd helped create. "I am so sorry, Sabrina." The words came out in a rush, choked with real tears. "Not for what's happening to me now, for everything, for every time we celebrated Brian and ignored you, for every birthday we made you feel less than, for that night in the rain. Oh God, for that night." She broke down, sobbing in a way I had never seen before. It wasn't performative, it was a gut-wrenching collapse. I was weak. I was so afraid of your father's disapproval that I let him destroy our family. I sacrificed you for his approval, and in the end, I lost everything anyway. I lost you. I felt a tectonic shift inside me. This wasn't the same woman who had sneered that I didn't have a real family. This was a broken person, finally facing the ruins of her life. "The apology you wrote in the letter," I said. "I didn't know if I believed it then. I didn't fully believe it myself," she admitted, wiping her eyes. "I was still blaming you. I thought if I said sorry, you'd have to let us back in. But this is different. I'm not asking for anything, Sabrina. I just needed you to know that I see it all now, and I am truly, deeply sorry for the mother I was. It wasn't a magic fix. It didn't erase a lifetime of pain, but it was a start, a real one. Thank you for telling me," I said, and I meant it. She nodded, seeming to understand that was all she would get. She turned to go back to her car. "Mom," I called out. She turned, a flicker of hope in her red-rimmed eyes. "You should talk to someone. A therapist, not for me, for you." She gave a slow, sad nod. I started last week." She got in her car and drove away. I walked back into my garden, my heart pounding. I told Patrick everything when he got home. He held me and simply asked, "How do you feel?" "I don't know." I answered truthfully, "It doesn't fix anything, but it's something." That was 6 months ago. My mother is still in therapy. We've had coffee a handful of times, always in a public, neutral place. The conversations are stilted, awkward. We're learning how to be in the same room without the ghosts of my father and Brian between us. She talks about her apartment, her new part-time job at a library. She asks about my business, about Patrick. She never asks to see the house. She never asks for a thing. It's a fragile, tentative thread. I don't know if it will ever grow into a full rope I can trust my weight to. But for the first time, I feel like I'm dealing with a real person, not the puppet of my father's ego. The other shoe dropped. And maybe, just maybe, it landed in a way that finally cleared the air. My story isn't about a perfect reconciliation. Life isn't a movie. It's about learning that closure doesn't always mean someone finally gives you the apology you deserve. Sometimes closure is you finally realizing you don't need their apology to be whole. I built my own family. I defended my own home. And I learned that my peace is the most valuable thing I own. And I will protect it with the full force of the law and the strength of my own spirit from anyone who tries to threaten it, no matter what their last name is, the cottage, the garden, the life I've built. It's all still here, not because it was given to me, but because I fought for it. And that makes all the difference. They say time heals all wounds, but that's not entirely true. Time just gives you the space to build scar tissue. And let me tell you, the scar tissue I've built over my life is strong. It has to be, that fragile thread with my mother, it held. It's been almost a year since she stood crying on the road outside my house. We've settled into a rhythm, a monthly lunch at a quiet cafe halfway between my town and her apartment. It's not a Hallmark movie, it's complicated. There are still moments of breathtaking awkwardness where the ghost of my father sits at the table with us. But she's trying, genuinely trying. She's started talking about the past, unprompted. Not to make excuses, but to acknowledge it. I remember when you won that art award in high school. She said over soup one day, her voice soft with a regret that felt ancient. Your father said it was a distraction. I should have framed it and put it on the mantel anyway. It was a small thing, but it was everything. It was an admission that my reality, my pain, had been real all along. Meanwhile, life with Patrick was the beautiful, steady counterpoint to all that past drama. We were talking about starting a family of our own. The idea used to terrify me. What if I became my mother? What if I repeated the cycle, but my therapist helped me see that the very fear of it was my first and best defense. Patrick just held my hand and said, "We'll figure it out together. We'll be the parents we needed when we were kids." The foundation was thriving. We'd helped 3 more Jamesa get back on their feet. My business Elevation Designs had grown enough that I'd hired 2 more full-time designers. I was no longer just a survivor. I was a creator, an employer, a pillar in my small community. I thought the storms were finally behind me. I was wrong. The call came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. It was from a lawyer in Arizona, Brian's lawyer. My first instinct was to hang up, but something made me stay on the line. "Ms. Lewis," the man said, his voice professionally neutral, "I'm representing your brother, Brian Wilson. He's asked me to reach out to you." My grip tightened on the phone. "Regarding what?" "He's violating a restraining order by having you contact me." "The order pertains to direct contact, Ms. Lewis. This is a legal intermediary, and it's regarding a medical matter." A cold dread trickled down my spine. "What kind of medical matter?" "Your brother was in a car accident 2 weeks ago, a serious one. He sustained a spinal injury. The prognosis is uncertain." I sat down, the world tilting slightly. Despite everything, the news hit me like a physical blow. He was my brother, the golden child who had smirked at me across the dinner table, the man who had helped my father try to steal my home, and now he was badly hurt, alone in Arizona. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice hollow. "He has no one else," the lawyer stated matter of factly. "Your father has cut off all contact following the divorce. Your mother, he's unwilling to reach out to her. He has significant medical debts piling up. He's facing a long-term rehabilitation process and has no viable support system. He's asking for your help." I laughed. It was a sharp, bitter sound. "My help, after everything? You have got to be kidding me." "I understand this is unexpected," the lawyer said, clearly choosing his words carefully. "I'm merely relaying his request. He's asking if you would consider, well, coming to Arizona to help him manage his care, perhaps even facilitate a move back closer to home." The sheer, staggering audacity of it took my breath away. The universe, it seemed, had a profoundly twisted sense of humor. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Patrick's steady breathing beside me. I was torn in a way I hadn't been since the night I slept in my car. This wasn't about a house or money. This was about basic human decency, about what you owe someone who shares your blood, even when they've spilled so much of it. The boy who taught me how to ride a bike was tangled up with the man who called me a failure. The brother who once secretly bought me ice cream when I was sad was the same person who watched, silent, as our father closed the door on me in the rain. I talked to Patrick. I talked to my therapist. I even, for the first time, broached the subject with my mother during one of our lunches. Her face went pale when I told her. She stirred her tea for a long, long time. I always made excuses for him. She finally said, her voice thick, "I told myself he was just following your father's lead. But he was an adult, Sabrina. He made his own choices. She looked up at me, her eyes clear and sad. You don't owe him anything, but you have to live with whatever decision you make. So make the one that lets you sleep at night. Her words echoed my own thoughts. This wasn't about saving Brian. This was about saving myself from becoming hardened, from letting their toxicity turn my own heart to stone. A week later, I called the lawyer back. I will not be going to Arizona, I said, my voice firm. I will not be his nurse, his caregiver, or his moving coordinator. The man who betrayed me and tried to make me homeless does not get to claim the privileges of a brother now that he's in need. I could almost feel the lawyer's disappointment on the other end of the line. However, I continued, I am not without compassion. I laid out my terms. They were non-negotiable. I will pay for a one-time consultation with a top-rated medical case manager in his area. That person can assess his situation, connect him with local resources, and help him navigate the system. That is it. That is the beginning and the end of my involvement. And in return, he will sign a legally binding document drafted by my lawyer stating that he renounces any and all past, present, or future claims against me, my property, or my estate, and that this single act of assistance constitutes a full and final settlement of any perceived family debt. There was a long silence. M.S. Lewis, that is, quite specific. It has to be, I said. I've learned that the hard way. 2 days later, Brian himself called me. The restraining order was technically still in place, but I took the call. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to know who I was really dealing with. He sounded weak. The arrogant boom was gone, replaced by a thin, reedy tone. Sabrina, the lawyer told me, your offer. It's not an offer, Brian. It's the only thing on the table. He was quiet for a moment. I could hear the hum of hospital equipment in the background. A case manager. That's it. I'm your brother. You stopped being my brother when you helped them try to steal my home. I said, the old anger surfacing, but now tempered with a cold certainty. You are a man who made poor choices and is now facing the consequences. I am offering you a tool to help yourself. That is more than you ever offered me. He started to cry. It wasn't a manipulation. It was the raw, helpless sound of a person who had finally hit rock bottom. The golden child was tarnished, broken, and utterly alone. I'm sorry, Sabrina. He choked out. I'm so sorry for all of it. I closed my eyes. The apology I'd once craved had finally come, and it didn't fix a thing. It was just sad. I believe you're sorry now, Brian. I said softly, but sorry doesn't rebuild trust. It doesn't erase the past. My offer stands. Take it or leave it. He took it. The paperwork was signed. My lawyer handled everything. I transferred the funds for the case manager, and then I closed that chapter for good. I didn't do it for him. I did it for me. I did it so that when I looked in the mirror, I could see a person who had been tested by fire, who had been betrayed and broken, but who had not let that break her capacity for a measured, protected kind of compassion. I refused to become like them. I was in my garden a few weeks later, the rich smell of earth in my hands when I felt it. A deep, profound sense of peace. It was over, truly over. The war was finally won. Not with a dramatic courtroom victory, but with a quiet, firm boundary drawn from a place of strength, not hatred. Patrick came out and put his arms around me, resting his hands on my stomach. We'd just found out I was pregnant. You okay? He asked. I looked around. At the cottage my grandmother gave me, the garden I had brought back to life, the man I loved, the future growing inside me. I thought about the mother I was slowly, cautiously rebuilding with, and the brother I had finally, mercifully, released myself from. The scar tissue had held. It was strong. It was part of me now. I leaned back into his embrace. Yeah, I said, and for the first time, I believed it with every fiber of my being. I'm okay. My story isn't about revenge. It's about sovereignty. It's about taking the shattered pieces of the life you were given and building a beautiful, unshakable mosaic on your own terms, and protecting that mosaic with grace and with grit for the rest of your days. That piece, it wasn't the end of the story. It was the foundation for everything that came next. I was finally building on solid ground, not the quicksand of my family's making. The pregnancy was a new kind of journey. Every kick, every ultrasound was a miracle that felt deeply personal. It was like my body was finally proving to me what my heart had been learning, that I was capable of creating something pure, something good. Patrick was my rock, reading parenting books aloud at night and turning the room above the garage into a sunlit nursery. We painted it a soft yellow, the color of hope. My mother found out during one of our lunches. I'd been waiting for the right moment, a little nervous. When I told her, her hands flew to her mouth and her eyes filled with tears. But this time, they were tears of pure, uncomplicated joy. "Oh, Sabrina," she whispered. "A baby?" And then, carefully, hesitantly, she asked the question I knew was coming. Would it? Would it be all right if I knitted something? A blanket, perhaps. It was a small request, but it was perfect. It wasn't demanding to be in the delivery room or asking to babysit. It was an offering, a gesture of love that asked for nothing in return. "I'd like that, Mom," I said, and I meant it. The blanket arrived a month later. It was a beautiful, intricate pattern in soft shades of green and cream. Tucked inside was a simple note, "For my grandchild, may your life be filled with the strength and love your mother has always had. Love, Grandma Diane." I held that blanket and cried. They were healing tears. It was the first gift from my family that had no strings, no hidden price tag. It was just love. My due date was in the fall, right as the leaves on the oak tree in Grandma Margaret's garden were turning to fire. It felt like a beautiful, poetic circle. But life, as I'd learned, always has one more test in store. I was 8 months pregnant, waddling through the local farmer's market with Patrick, when I saw him. My father, he was standing by a stall selling apples, looking older and more diminished than I could have imagined. His once proud posture was stooped, his expensive suits replaced by a worn-looking jacket. He was alone, our eyes met across the crowd. A jolt of pure adrenaline shot through me. My first instinct was to run, to protect the life inside me from his toxic presence. Patrick's hand tightened on mine. "Sabrina." My father didn't approach. He didn't even nod. He just looked at me, and then his gaze dropped to my very prominent, very pregnant belly. The expression on his face was one I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't entitlement. It was a profound, gut-wrenching shame. It was the look of a man seeing the living, breathing proof of everything he had lost. A daughter, a son-in-law, a grandchild. A future. He held my gaze for one more second, then turned and melted back into the crowd, disappearing as quickly as he'd appeared. I stood there, frozen, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Are you okay?" Patrick asked, his voice full of concern. I took a deep breath, expecting the old familiar storm of anger and pain to rise up, but it didn't. Instead, I felt nothing, no rage, no fear, just a quiet, final pity. "Yeah," I said, placing a protective hand on my belly. "I'm okay." Seeing him was like seeing a ghost, and I was no longer afraid of ghosts. 3 weeks later, my water broke. After a long, intense labor, I held my daughter in my arms. We named her Margaret Eleanor, Maggie for short. After the 2 women who had taught me how to be strong, how to be loved, and how to build my own shelter. The first time my mother came to the cottage to meet her, it was a landmark moment. She crossed the threshold not as an invader, but as an invited guest. She wept as she held Maggie, rocking her gently in the very living room where she had once claimed I had no real family. "She's perfect," Mom whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You're going to be a wonderful mother, Sabrina. You already are." And in that moment I knew she was right. The cycle was broken. Life became a beautiful, chaotic whirlwind of motherhood, marriage, and business. The foundation continued its work, and I found that being a mother gave me even more empathy for the young adults we helped. My own story became a part of my strength when I counseled them. "I've been where you are," I could say, and look at me now. About a year after Maggie was born, I received a letter. The handwriting on the envelope was my father's. My stomach clenched. I almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity, or maybe just the need for a final piece of the puzzle, won out. It was short, and unlike any letter he had ever written before. "Sabrina, I saw you at the market. You looked happy and strong. I am living with the consequences of my life. They are heavy. I understand now that a legacy is not a house or money. It is the love you leave behind. I have none. I will not bother you again. Please know that I am sorry for all of it. Tell your daughter she has a mother worth being proud of. Richard, there was no request, no demand, just a stark, lonely admission. I didn't write back. There was nothing left to say. But I didn't throw the letter away either. I placed it in a box with my grandmother's old recipes and the first ultrasound picture of Maggie. It was a part of my history, a dark chapter that was finally, definitively, closed. Just last week, we were in the garden. Maggie, now a vibrant 2-year, old with Patrick's eyes and my stubborn streak, was helping me plant tomatoes, her tiny hands covered in rich soil. Patrick was grilling dinner, and my mother was sitting on the porch swing, knitting a tiny sweater for the new baby we have on the way. I looked at this scene, this messy, beautiful, loud, loving family I had built, and my grandmother's voice came to me, as clear as if she were sitting right there. Never let anyone tell you what your worth is. Only you decide that. I had decided. I had fought for it. I had built it with my own 2 hands and a heart that refused to stay broken. Maggie held up a muddy clump of earth, her face beaming with pride. Flower, Mama. I took her dirty little hand in mine. Yes, my love. I said, my voice steady and sure, we're growing flowers. And we really truly were. You'd think after all that, life would just be smooth, but peace isn't the absence of noise. It's learning to find your own melody in the middle of it. And our melody was about to get a little louder, a little more beautiful. The new baby my mother was knitting for. She arrived right on schedule, as summer was warming the soil in Grandma Margaret's garden. We named her Claire Margaret, a name that felt both soft and strong. And with 2 children under 3, our quiet cottage became a symphony of giggles, tiny footsteps, and the occasional, inevitable toddler meltdown. It was during one of those chaotic, wonderful afternoons. Maggie was trying to read a book to a patient Claire, and I was covered in pureed sweet potato, that my mother, who had become a reliable and gentle presence, looked at me and said something that caught me off guard. You're so natural at this, Sabrina. You never look as overwhelmed as I always felt. It was the first time she'd ever acknowledged her own struggle. I wiped a stray bit of carrot off my cheek. Are you kidding? I feel overwhelmed every single day. She gave a soft, knowing smile. I know, but you wear it differently. You're not afraid of it. I was always so afraid of getting it wrong, of what your father would say if the house was messy or if you children were too loud. I think I was so busy managing his perception of our family that I forgot to actually be a family. The honesty hung in the air between us, a fragile, precious thing. It was another piece of the puzzle sliding into place, not to excuse her, but to explain her. The prison she'd lived in had been of her own making, but my father had certainly been the architect. You're doing it differently, she repeated, her voice full of a quiet awe. You and Patrick, you're a team. And we traded off late. Night feedings and morning toddler negotiations. We tag-teamed client calls and bedtime stories. We were building this life together. It was around this time that the past tried to send one last, faint echo. I received a formal-looking letter from a law firm in Arizona. My first thought was of Brian, and a cold dread settled in my stomach. Had he changed his mind, was he challenging our agreement? But the letter wasn't from Brian. It was from the executor of his estate. Brian was gone. The car accident injuries, combined with what the letter politely termed a period of declining health, had taken him. There was no family to notify. I was listed as his next of kin. There was no will, no assets, just a small, boxed-up collection of personal effects the lawyer asked if I wanted shipped. There were also outstanding cremation expenses. I sat at my kitchen table, the sounds of my daughters playing in the next room, and read the letter 3 times. I didn't feel sadness, not in the way you'd expect. It was a deeper, more complex feeling. A profound emptiness. The story of the golden child had ended not with a bang, but with a whimper in a sterile Arizona apartment. No wife, no children, no friends to mourn him. just a stack of debts and a sister who had legally absolved herself of him. I discussed it with Patrick that night. "You don't have to do anything," he said, his hand on my back. "You've already done more than he deserved." But I kept thinking about that little boy who shared my childhood home. The one who wasn't always a villain, just a product of the same toxic system, who had chosen to climb higher on my back rather than tear the system down. The next day, I called the lawyer. I authorized the cremation and paid the expenses. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a final act of closure, a way to lay a ghost to rest properly. When the small box of his effects arrived, I put it, unopened, in the attic next to my father's letter. Some chapters are meant to be closed, not reread. A few months later, my mother tentatively asked about Brian. I told her he was gone. She cried, not for the man he became, but for the boy he had been, for the life he could have had. We grieved the idea of a brother, not the reality. That experience, as strange and detached as it was, seemed to solidify something in my mother. She started living more fully. She joined a book club. She began volunteering at the local library, reading to children. She was building her own life, separate from the wreckage of her marriage, and finding her own worth in the process. One afternoon, she was watching Maggie and Claire while I tackled a big design project. I came out of my office to check on them and found them all in the garden. My mother was on her knees, her hands in the dirt, showing a fascinated Maggie how to gently loosen the soil around a seedling. "See, sweetheart," she was saying, her voice soft and patient, "we have to be gentle with the roots. They're what help it grow strong." The symbolism wasn't lost on me. She was teaching my daughter the very lesson her own mother had taught me. The lesson she, herself, had failed to learn in time for my childhood. I must have made a sound because she looked up and saw me. There was a moment of quiet understanding between us. No words were needed. She was trying. She was finally, truly trying to tend to the roots. Later, as we sat on the porch with glasses of iced tea, the girls napping inside, she looked out over the blooming garden. "You've created something really beautiful here, Sabrina," she said. "Not just the garden or the business, all of it, this home, this family." I followed her gaze. I saw the vibrant flowers, the sturdy cottage, the tire swing Patrick had hung from the oak tree. I heard the quiet breathing of my sleeping daughters through the open window. "I did," I said, and for the first time the statement was completely free of bitterness or defiance. It was just a fact. I built my own shelter. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You did, and it's storm-proof." And it is. Because the foundation isn't just concrete and wood. It's built on the truth that your worth is not up for debate. It's built on the love you choose to give and the love you choose to accept. It's built on the courage to sometimes be the one who ends the story, so a new, better one can begin. That moment on the porch with my mother, watching the life I'd built, that was the moment I knew the war was truly over, not with a dramatic final battle, but with a quiet, sustained peace. The fortress of my life wasn't just standing. It was thriving, filled with the sounds of the family I'd chosen and built. The years that followed weren't about surviving anymore. They were about living. Fully, deeply, and without looking over my shoulder. Patrick and I grew our businesses side by side, our partnership a constant source of strength. Elevation Designs became a respected name, and I made a point of mentoring young designers, especially women who were told their dreams weren't practical. I became the mentor I'd so desperately needed. My mother, Diane, became Grandma Di in the truest sense. She never tried to rewrite history or erase her mistakes. Instead, she showed up consistently and humbly for the present. She was at every school play, every birthday, her knitting needles constantly clicking, creating tangible proof of her love. Our relationship found its level, not the fairy tale mothered, otter bond I'd once fantasized about, but something real, respectful, and deeply valued. We had found a fragile, beautiful peace, built not on forgetting the past, but on building a better future together. Maggie and Claire grew up in the cottage, their roots sunk deep into that nourishing soil. They knew the story of great Grandma Margaret, the fierce woman whose love had literally sheltered them. They understood that family is a verb, an action of showing up, of tending to each other's roots. They never had to question their worth. It was the very air they breathed. As for my father, Richard, the echo of him faded completely. We never saw or heard from him again. He became a cautionary tale, a ghost in a story whose power had finally dimmed. The world he tried to build on control and conditional love had collapsed into nothing, while the world I built on authenticity and chosen love only grew stronger. One autumn afternoon, with the leaves in Grandma Margaret's garden turning to a blaze of gold and crimson, we were all outside. Patrick was manning the grill, the smell of wood smoke and burgers filling the air. Maggie, now a thoughtful 10-year-old, was reading under the oak tree. Claire, 7 and full of boundless energy, was trying to teach our goofy golden retriever to jump rope. My mother was setting the picnic table, laughing at the scene. I stood by the garden, my hands resting on the familiar, weathered wood of the fence post. I looked at this messy, joyful, imperfect, and perfect picture. This was my legacy, not a house, not a business, but this feeling, this safety, this love. I thought of the girl I once was the one sleeping in her car, sobbing on her parents' porch, believing she was a failure. I wished I could whisper to her. I wished I could tell her that the pain was not the end of her story, but the brutal, necessary beginning, that the people who abandoned her were clearing the way for the people who would truly cherish her, that the shelter she was about to build with her own 2 hands would be stronger and more beautiful than any she could have inherited. The scar tissue had not just held, it had become the strongest part of me. It had taught me that our greatest power isn't in avoiding the storm, but in learning to dance in the rain, and then building a roof so sturdy that those we love never have to get wet. My story is done. The battles are fought, the wounds are healed into scars, and the love remains. I built my own shelter, and now it is filled with light. If you're in the middle of your own storm, if you're feeling abandoned or betrayed, I hope my story is a reminder your worth is not negotiable. Your dreams are not frivolous, and the family you choose, the life you build from the ashes of the one that burned down, that can be the most beautiful story of all. Thank you for listening to mine.